Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zhang here, and today I'm back with another episode of Road to Ranked, where I climb the online series 2 VGC ladder in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and provide live commentary as I go. In this video, I'm going to be trying out a team featuring Bellibolt. This team was built by David Kotesh, who is one of the most creative team builders in VGC, and he finished 19th at a huge regionals over in Europe with this exact team towards the end of February. Bellibolt in general, I think, is just a really underplayed Pokemon, and it actually has a lot of value in the format because, one, it is very difficult to knock out, especially when you throw an Assault Vest onto it. Two, it can heal back a lot thanks to Parabolic Charge, which is a really unique attack. And three, it can actually deal massive amounts of damage, especially with his ability as well. And so the idea about Bellibolt is that it can often just stay on the field, soak up a lot of hits, deal out a lot of damage, while also healing back in return. The team also utilizes a fairly unique Torkoal set featuring Yawn, as well as Overheat and Helping Hand, and the Torkoal enables a lot of strong Paradox Pokemon on the team, such as Roaring Moon, as well as Great Tusk and Fluttermane. As always, I'll do a quick breakdown of the team, but if you want to just skip to the battles, check out the timestamps down below. And thanks so much as always for watching. If you enjoy, I'd really appreciate it if you consider leaving a like on the video or subscribing to the channel. It really helps out a ton. Anyway, let's dive into things. First of all, a huge thank you to David Kotesh for building and sharing this team. David finished 19th at the Bochum Regional Championships, which took place in the end of February, and this was, I think, one of the most interesting teams to come out from that tournament. David's also just one of the most creative team builders in VGC. He got top 16 at the 2022 World Championships with a really unique team featuring Dialga, Yveltal, and Gyarados, which is a core that basically no one had used in that season or in that tournament. David was the first high-level player to really put Bellibolt on my radar as well through this team, and Bellibolt is no joke. I've linked David's Twitter and YouTube down in the description below, as well as a rental and a paste if you want to try out the team. And question of the day, with us using Bellibolt, I want to know what you think is the most underrated Gen 9 Pokemon, either from a design standpoint or from a competitive standpoint. I honestly think Bellibolt is very slept on, and this team opened my eyes to just how good it can be. So let's talk about Bellibolt. The main idea behind Bellibolt is that it can survive for a really long time while also dealing good amounts of damage, especially thanks to its ability and strong attacks like Parabolic Charge and Thunderbolt. In addition, with the Water Tera and Muddy Water, you can actually deal large amounts of damage to Pokemon like Great Tusk and Talonflame, and Sucker Punch gives you some nice utility in breaking through Focus Sashes as well. With this amount of HP and defense investment, -1 Life Orb Great Tusk with Headlong Rush will not knock out Bellibolt, even if it hasn't Terra'd, which is nice, and then the rest of the investment is dumped between Special Attack and Special Defense. So the general idea behind this Pokemon is that it often isn't going to pick up one-hit knockouts, right? Its base Special Attack isn't that high, but it's also really difficult for your opponent to knock out Bellibolt, and Bellibolt matches up really well into a lot of Pokemon in the metagame. For example, Booster Energy Iron Bundle is one of the most common sets in the format. Bellibolt can completely wall that set and also just threaten Iron Bundle for a one-hit knockout, which is really nice. So the main thing is that Bellibolt will just stay on the field for a long time, soak up a lot of damage, and then heal back up, especially thanks to Parabolic Charge. Now, Parabolic Charge is a move that also hits your side of the field, and so as a result, Great Tusk synergizes really nicely with Bellibolt. The idea behind Great Tusk here is that you have something that's completely immune to a Parabolic Charge, and what's interesting about this Great Tusk is that it doesn't have Ground Tera, it's Grass Tera, which can help out against things like Amoonguss, for example, and also makes you take less damage from Water-type attacks, but you've also got Stone Edge and Taunt. Now, this is a fairly unique Great Tusk slot, right? And the idea behind Stone Edge is a lot of people will use Flying Tera to often get around Great Tusk, and it generally is really valuable. However, Stone Edge means that you can actually hit those Flying-type Pokemon for super effective damage. I had one game where I went up against a Flying Tera Tyranitar, and without the Stone Edge, I probably would have just lost immediately because Tyranitar was at like 60% health, but I had the Sun up, and a Stone Edge Protosynthesis hit the Tyranitar Flying Tera and just KO'd it immediately, which is really nice. You've also got Taunt on the Great Tusk moveset, which is a move that can catch a lot of opponents off guard, especially valuable into setup-oriented strategies, Trick Room, and Redirection, for example. Taunt in particular is really nice in just catching things like Amoonguss off guard, and David used this in an open team sheet environment, so its opponents knew that he had Taunt, but in closed team sheet best of one, this move can single-handedly win you games often. You've also got a couple of other Paradox Mons in Fluttermane and Roaring Moon. The Fluttermane here is Choice Specs with Max Speed investment. I think one thing that's interesting is a lot of people have moved away from using Max Speed on Fluttermane. Choice Specs has become, I feel like, one of the most common items on this Pokemon, and with it being used, a lot of people realize, well, I don't necessarily really need to go Max Speed, I can invest a lot more in bulk. This Fluttermane actually still has a good amount of defense investment, but the idea is that with Max Speed, you very often will be frequently outspeeding opposing Choice Specs Fluttermanes, which is a really big deal because you can just Shadow Ball them for a KO before they really get to move. So having the advantage against the majority of Fluttermanes is really nice in that regard. Fairy Tera just to boost your damage output of your Fairy type attacks and also get rid of some of your weaknesses as well. Roaring Moon is the other Paradox Mon on this team, and this set is actually really interesting. I think most people have been using Roaring Moon either with Tailwind or Dragon Dance, throw a booster energy onto it, but the idea behind this Roaring Moon is that it is just fairly valuable in terms of putting on pressure against your opponent and can deal large amounts of damage while also decreasing your opponent's attack through Breaking Swipe. You've also got Terra Blast with Fire Terra, which is really nice, especially with Torkoal, because that can really catch opponent teams off guard, which I think is pretty neat. So yeah, Roaring Moon in general here can just put on a lot of pressure against opposing teams, and Clear Amulet's really nice, especially into teams that have Intimidate, such as Arcanine, for example. Finally, to round things out, you've got 2 fire types. We have our own Arcanine here. Air Balloon exists on this set because, as you'll notice, this team actually otherwise just doesn't have any ground resistances or immunities. Air Balloon is really nice because it turns Arcanine from a Pokemon that's weak to ground type attacks into one that can very safely switch into Great Tusk, which is a really big deal. So I think this is one of the best uses of Air Balloon I've ever seen in Scarlet and Violet VGC, and it makes so much sense on this team composition. Otherwise, you've got a fairly standard moveset of Flare Blitz, Extreme Speed, Will-O-Wisp, and Protect, and Grass Terra is quite nice in being immune to Spore and also no longer being weak to ground type attacks. The final Pokemon is Torkoal, and I think this Torkoal set's really interesting. It's a Citrus Berry set with max HP and max special defense, and so the idea is that you are just fairly defensive on both ends since Torkoal already has really good base natural defense. The moveset's really interesting. It's Overheat, Yawn, Helping Hand, and Clear Smog. The general idea behind this is Clear Smog is really valuable into Dondozo teams as well as teams that just want to set up. Yeah, being able to Clear Smog a Dondozo in itself is really valuable. You've got Flying Terra as well, which also gets rid of the ground weakness, similar to why Arcanine's running Air Balloon, because otherwise, yeah, a lot of these Pokemon just take way too much damage from ground type attacks, so Flying Terra is really nice. The main idea behind Torkoal is to, be able to set up the Sun for its teammates in Flutter, Roaring Moon, and Great Tusk, all which, can capitalize a lot off photosynthesis. Yawn is really nice into those bulky teams where, like, your opponent won't do that much damage into you and they often want to set up. You can just kind of force them to start switching out immediately, which is quite nice. And Helping Hand's really just to further kind of increase the damage output of Flutter, Roaring Moon, and Tusk, because you can lead things like Torkoal Flutter, Torkoal Roaring Moon, Torkoal Tusk, right? Activate photosynthesis immediately and have Helping Hand support from it. So it's a really interesting and unique Torkoal set. It's fairly different from most of the ways people are using Torkoal currently. So yeah, a lot of different ways that you can play with the team. I think a Bellibolt is honestly a really strong lead into a lot of teams if you feel like it can deal a lot of damage when your opponent doesn't have too much setup against you. You can go for a combination of Flutter, Roaring Moon, Tusk, all of those just put on a lot of offensive pressure immediately. Torkoal plus any of the Paradox Pokemon also makes sense. I think Arcanine plus really most of the Pokemon as a lead also is fairly strong with this team, so there's a lot of flexibility. But yeah, that's it for a quick breakdown. Let's quickly highlight some weaknesses. So the first thing that I'd highlight in terms of weaknesses is that Bellibolt doesn't necessarily get huge one-hit knockouts, especially if its ability hasn't been activated. So one thing you can kind of consider is bursting it down with damage immediately. Now, that's a little bit easier said than done, especially because if Bellibolt just goes for Terra, then it's really difficult to KO it, especially on like turn 1, and then Bellibolt can just heal back up with Parabolic Charge. If you're using this team and you're using Bellibolt, you have to be very intentional about your moves, right? Because if you, for example, don't click Parabolic Charge on a turn where you take a lot of damage, then the next turn your opponent can potentially just double up onto you for a KO immediately. So keep that in mind. Some Pokemon honestly match up fairly well against Bellibolt. For example, Bulk Up Annihilate with leftovers, like Bellibolt will just consistently stack up Rage Fist, which is pretty bad for it, and while not doing that much damage in return. Pokemon that like to set up in general can be valuable into Bellibolt as well. I think one other way you can deal with this Pokemon is like baiting out its Terra early and then hitting it with super effective attacks afterwards. And yeah, once like the Terra has been committed, then it's hard to obviously, you can't Terra anything else on this team. And the team does have Flying Terra, Torkoal, and Air Balloon Arcanine, but ground type attacks and Pokemon can still be fairly scary, right? Like a well-conserved Great Tusk, for example, especially if you break the Air Balloon on Arcanine, can be pretty annoying, so that's something you'll want to keep in mind as well. And yeah, I'd say the main thing about Bellibolt is it can match up super well into certain teams and can match up super poorly into other teams, and so the main thing in trying to beat it is, yeah, like bursting it down as quickly as possible. Don't let it continuously just heal up with Parabolic Charge. Pokemon that, obviously resist or immune to Parabolic Charge are also valuable, because then Bellibolt can't heal up nearly as quickly. And then if your team has recovery, whether it be like leftovers or Pollen Puff, that can also be pretty good, because Bellibolt generally wants to like stay on the field and attack for a long time and slowly chip away your opponent, but if you can just heal back all the damage that it does, it makes things a little bit trickier. Another thing I'd point out is just the lack of protects in general, right? Like Flutter doesn't have Protect, Belly doesn't, Torkoal, Great Tusk doesn't have it, so you can potentially leverage that to your advantage. I think opposing speed control sometimes can get a little bit tricky when you're using these Pokemon without Protect, because then maybe your opponent just gets better speed control up relative to this team, which doesn't really have natural speed control, and then they can just angle to, you know, pick up one-hit knockouts onto you before you really get to move. I think the Terras on this team are really important, right? And so if you are able to bait out like a Terra early, then you can leverage that knowledge, saying, okay, now they can't Terra afterwards, to your advantage. And yeah, ground type attacks, like I mentioned earlier, are still really powerful. So that's one other thing I'd point out. The final thing to talk about here is I'd say like Torkoal, for example, in particular, is relatively passive. It does have overheat, but this thing doesn't have any special attack investment. So I've lost a few games while practicing with this team where I like feel like I need to bring Torkoal, but then my opponents keep attacking around the Torkoal and everything around it just keeps fainting, right? And like I just don't get any value out of it other than maybe clicking Yawn for a turn or two and trying to disrupt my opponent a little bit. So you can also leverage that to your advantage. But yeah, those are just a couple of things that I've noted. Let's get into the battles. All right, what do we got here? Hands, Indeedee, Armarouge, Tusk, Rotom, and Scizor. I like how Bellibolt looks here, honestly. First of all, they have a lot of special attackers, which Bellibolt thrives against. And so what does Bellibolt not love going up against here? I mean, if it's Swords Dance Scizor, that could be interesting. Tusk, we can actually Water Terra and just click Muddy Water, which is pretty valuable. Roaring Moon is actually pretty interesting here thanks to Breaking Swipe as well as Throat Chop. I'm a little bit hesitant to bring Flutter into a matchup with Scizor, but I guess they have their own Indeedee, which makes things a little awkward for them. Tusk also has Taunt, which is pretty interesting. I'm kind of down for, I think, Roaring Moon plus Bellibolt as the lead here. In the back, Arcanine with Intimidate with Air Balloon seems pretty solid. It can burn Scizor, the hands, as well as the Tusk. And then I'm thinking my Tusk is the last one. Torkoal I don't think is that necessary here. We don't get that much value out of Clear Smog. Flutter, I think, is a pretty solid pick here. It does have super effective damage into Hands and Tusk, but with them being bulkier, having redirection with Indeedee and Trick Room with Indeedee and Armarouge, I think I feel a little bit less confident with Flutter, right? Because if they get Trick Room up, Flutter is just going to go down really quickly. And I think if I were to properly use Flutter, I'd either be applying a ton of offensive pressure with it at the beginning of the game or using it to clean up. But I think that's easier said than done. It's going to be Hands plus Rotom. Okay. Curious about the Rotom set here. I think turn 1 I'm down to Protect into Parabolic Charge. I would expect like Fake Out to go into the Bellibolt slot, but that's honestly okay. I want to scout out for what Rotom wants to go for right now, whether it be like a Will-O-Wisp or something else. Okay. Does activate our ability. It is Will-O-Wisp. So it's interesting. I could go for a Fire Terra defensively with Roaring Moon right now. But it's pretty easy for me to just switch into, say, Arcanine as well. Doing so, though, would... And if I were to click Parabolic Charge, it actually would break my own... I mean, I could click Thunderbolt instead, right? Yeah, I think it's probably fine to just go Thunderbolt into Rotom and then pivot Roaring Moon out into Arcanine. I could have also switched in Tusk, but switching in Tusk on a Will-O-Wisp feels really bad. The main thing here is I didn't want to give up my Terra this early on because I think Water Terra Bellibolt is really good against the potential Tusk in the back with Muddy Water. And... yeah, I don't know. Roaring Moon, Fire Terra just to avoid a Will-O-Wisp for one turn, I don't feel like it's that valuable for me. They actually end up going for Hydro Pump, though. Okay. Nice play. We're going to get Thunderbolt off onto the Rotom. Oh my gosh! That did so much damage! What? And I can Extreme Speed to finish off Rotom. I also have Sucker Punch here, so like I'm actually down to Sucker Punch and then Will-O-Wisp. Maybe, I mean, Rotom could get around the Sucker Punch by clicking Will-O-Wisp or Protect of their own, but honestly, that's fine. Burning Hands right now would be very nice. Hand switches, makes sense. What is that? Tusk, okay. as Rotom protects. Yeah, so this is what I mean, right? Like, I can go for Water Tera with Belly Bolt now. If we hit this Will-O-Wisp, they're in so much trouble, I think. Nice. Man, Belly Bolt doing 90, though, is just kind of nuts to a Rotom. It's so satisfying. The downside is Belly Bolt can't really heal up with Parabolic Charge right now since Tusk is out on the field, but, like, I don't know. This is burnt. Kind of down to just go for Water Tera, Muddy Water. Should I switch out? I think conserving Intimidate for later on in the battle is pretty valuable. Yeah, I'm down to pivot into Roaring Moon. But I think like right now I actually pressure with the double knockout if they don't KO Belly Bolt, right? They're not switching, okay. They're not going for a Terror either. Ideal output here is Muddy Water just picks up the double KO. Like they go Headlong Rush onto the Roaring Moon slot. They might target Belly Bolt with Headlong Rush, which is also fine. The only scary thing here is I think potentially missing Muddy Water. Okay, they just Earthquake, perfect. Unless they Thunderbolted the Belly Bolt slot, which would be a nice play by them. Nope, they go for Will-O-Wisp, yeah. And the Will-O-Wisp makes sense because I had revealed Sucker Punch earlier. But if Muddy Water hits, that might just be a double KO right now. We do miss onto Rotom, but that's fine. I think hitting Tusk is way more important here, so it could be worse. Oh my gosh, Belly Bolt! You're so good! It did 90% to a Rotom and managed to essentially get the one-hit knockout at a Tusk after the burn damage. Oh my gosh. And that was with the Muddy Water miss as well, right? If we hit that Muddy Water, then Rotom goes down, and I can just, like, Psycho and Intimidate against the Arcanine as well. They bring out Scizor. Okay. Breaking Swipe from Roaring Moon is really good right now. I'm down to Parabolic Charge and Breaking Swipe. Yep, Rotom protects. That's fine. I'm not sure Scizor. Oh, it could be Clear Amulet Scizor, I guess. I didn't think about that. We'll see. Okay, Breaking Swipe. Nice, no Clear Amulet. -1. Oh, Tailwind. That's pretty cool. My question is actually whether or not Sucker Punch KOs Rotom with the burn from the, What is this Pokemon's damage output? Belly Bolt has basically done almost all of the damage in this game so far. And it's Citrus Berries. Citrus Berry Tailwind Scizor. That's really interesting. I've never really seen that before. Fine by me. Thunderbolt into the Belly Bolt slot certainly makes a lot of sense. I honestly do think Sucker Punch KOs Rotom from that range. But they might Will-O-Wisp instead. I'm honestly down to just click Parabolic Charge here and Breaking Swipe. I don't even know if Thunderbolt KOs the Belly Bolt since we're Assault Vest and it's like almost max HP. Rotom switches, even better. Man, this I didn't think Belly Bolt would 1v4 right now, but it legitimately is. Like, what is happening? Okay, they go for U-turn. That's pretty cool. But Roaring Moon actually survives thanks to that attack drop earlier. Yeah, I mean, this is tough for my opponent, right? Because I will get the knockout onto Rotom with Breaking Swipe, get Iron Hands down to -1 attack, and then heal back a little bit as well. And now, well, I guess they have Wild Charge from the hands. That's going to be their best means of offense into Belly Bolt. But yeah, Breaking Swipe gets the KO. And this is why, like, if we had hit Rotom earlier, I would have been in such good shape, because then it's like they're stuck with 2 physical attackers. Arcanine can just come out and in and intimidate, but I mean, Belly Bolt's been putting on a clinic so far in this game, so I'm still very happy about its general outcome. The one thing I do have to consider is that, like, they have Tailwind up, and I don't necessarily actually have Protect on Belly Bolt or the Tusk, which makes things a little bit more interesting, right? I think here it makes a lot of sense to just bring out the Arcanine, get Intimidate off against both. Honestly, at this point, like, I just don't know how much damage they actually do. Scizor has revealed U-turn and Tailwind with Citrus Berry. You would expect Bullet Punch and then a fourth move, like maybe Protect, I think, would make sense. I don't think Scizor is actually that scary here, but... Hands is at -2 now. You're at -1, 2 turns of Tailwind. I can't Protect with Tusk is the thing. Wild Charge onto that slot certainly makes sense. I think switching Tusk in here and just going for Flare Blitz onto Scizor makes sense. Force it to be a 3v1. Maybe Scizor protects. Maybe they go for Fake Out, but it's not that scary. I guess it could be Swords Dance, U-turn, Bullet Punch, Tailwind, but that'd be kind of surprising. They still haven't gone for a Terra yet, though, is the main thing. Okay, ends up being Fake Out on Arcanine, and just U-turn onto the belly slot. It's fine. Last turn of Tailwind from their end. You'd expect maybe Tusk to go for a Terra now, but that's fine. I'm down to go for Headlong Rush onto the Scizor slot, and then Will-O-Wisp onto the hand slot. I think with the Intimidate and the Breaking Swipes, their damage output is just fairly negligible right now. And I'm going to target Scizor because I expect hands to, like, Terra here every time. Could be Grass Terra. Yep, exactly. I think also may have been smarter to, like, switch Arcanine out into Belly Bolt, but I like the idea of just going for Will-O-Wisp here to try to seal up the game. Be Iron Head onto Tusk, okay. We're still faster than hands. No flinch from Iron Head. Beautiful. And Headlong Rush gets the KO. I mean, Belly Bolt was so good in this game. It did 90% to Rotom, got essentially a one-hit knockout onto Tusk, did like 50-60% to Scizor, and it still was not, like, fainted at all, right? Now I get the burn onto hand, so it's at -2 attack with the burn. Oh my goodness. They just go for Drain Punch for, like, just under 30. Cool. Now we can just end the game with Close Combat and Flare Blitz. This is what Belly Bolt can do, essentially, right? It can stay on the field for a really long time and heal back very consistently thanks to Parabolic Charge. And if you look at my opponent's team, like, there are no clear Belly Bolt answers. The best one, honestly, is the Tusk, but that's where the Water Terror with Belly Bolt plus Muddy Water is such a nasty combination, right? Because my opponent brought out the Tusk, and then Tusk essentially just fainted after one turn. What was also big was them just switching into Tusk into that Will-O-Wisp, but yeah, my opponent's team, like, they had Scizor, Hands, and Tusk, and so with Hands being out on that slot, like, that slot was always going to be left exposed to a Will-O-Wisp, and they don't really have too much counterplay to that. You would have needed, like, Indeedee for redirection or Arm Rouge to kind of soak it up, but yeah, what an amazing game to showcase how good Belly Bolt can be. Okay, we've got Tusk, Talon, Tyranitar, Bundle, Flutter, and Gothitelle. This is still just one of the, you know, strongest archetypes that exist in the format. Although I think it's interesting because I think with the more recent regional championships, we haven't seen too many of, like, the Gothitelle variants perform as well. I think people just honestly aren't bringing it as much. The team that I brought to Vancouver Regionals was similar, but it had Baxcalibur. And Baxcalibur was a really critical member of that team, as well as Brute Bonded over Tyranitar plus Gothitelle. So I think Belly Bolt really thrives against this team composition in general. Now, the main thing to consider is that I will likely get trapped in against my opponent if they bring out Gothitelle, but that's fine, I think. We just have to consider leading in a way so that we don't just lose to Gothitelle plus something on turn 1. So I'm thinking Flutter plus Belly Bolt, because the Flutter can switch out. I think Arcanine for Intimidate's really valuable. Torkoal would actually activate Photosynthesis on the opposing side, which is not ideal, and I don't think Torkoal's really that valuable with Yawn and Clear Smog. It's not really the right matchup for it, so I think Tusk or Roaring Moon in the back makes sense, with a preference towards Tusk here being able to one-shot a fair amount of their team. So I'm all aboard the Belly Bolt train once again here, though. I think, like, the reality with Belly Bolt in this matchup is that we have Intimidate from Arcanine, we have a defensive Terra with Water, which also turns into an offensive Terra, allowing us to deal more damage with Muddy Water, and the Belly Bolt's just fairly difficult to knock out. I think it probably... The Pokemon I don't want to face against the most with it is mainly going to be that Tyranitar, just because, like, Tyranitar with the Salt Vest can take hits decently well, but it's going to be Talonflame plus Tusk, which is, in my opinion, super ideal. What I'm going to do turn 1 here is just Water Terra Belly Bolt, switch Flutter Mane out into Arcanine, and then just click Muddy Water. I think there's very little counterplay to that. And this is where Air Balloon is such a big item here on the Arcanine, right? And so that's one of the reasons why I really, really like this set in particular, because even with Intimidate, Headlong Rush into an Arcanine still does so much damage, especially like Life Orb Talonflame, right? But with this play, it's like I would essentially take very little damage from a -1 EQ, get a huge Muddy Water off in return, and potentially have, knockout pressure onto both Pokemon immediately. Then, even if we don't get a KO onto either slot, the Arcanine can just finish it off with an Extreme Speed the next turn. But the main reason I wanted to lead Flutter Mane here was in case they led Gothitelle. I think Flutter also kind of just baits them into maybe attacking me immediately, which is fairly valuable. But this is why Muddy Water plus Water Tear in particular is a really nice combination, because it's so good into the Great Tusk. So, we're going to start off with the Terra here. I think it would also make sense for my opponent to go for Protect plus Tailwind turn 1, but the reality is that Belly Bolt's already going to be fairly difficult for the opposing side to deal with. I just, don't think there are too many Belly Bolt answers to begin with. They go for Taunt, okay. No Tailwind, which is also good for me if we end up knocking out Talonflame. Beautiful. There's Muddy Water. Sorry, there's Earthquake. Yeah, so -1, Life Orb, Earthquake, non-Terra. Does 48 damage. And Muddy Water does not miss. Very nice. That actually wasn't Life Orb Tusk, though, looks like. Oh my goodness. Almost gets the knockout onto both. Both survive with the Sliver, but that's fine. We can Extreme Speed now to finish off either slot. So the main thing is I could actually Extreme Speed Talonflame to deny them Tailwind. And we have Air Balloon here anyway, right? So it's not like this really scares me that much. Yeah. Alright, I'm down to Muddy Water here, and then just E-Speed into Talonflame. Okay, Tusk didn't protect, so I could have gone the other way around. But that's fine. No Tailwind here is, I think, really critical. It's just close combat here. Nice. Okay. The only downside is not being able to heal back up with Parabolic Charge right now, but we're up 4-2 already. And they don't have Tailwind. What would I expect in the back? A combination of... I don't think it should be Gothitelle in the back. Gothitelle in the back I actually think would be really bad for them, because then it's one slot that essentially can't deal damage. I would expect, Flutter plus T-Tar. That's T-Tar coming out. And that's Flutter, I believe. Yep. Probably Specs Flutter, right? I've got Tusk in the back. Oh, it's Booster Energy. That's interesting. Okay. Special attack, sure. I mean, a Rock Slide here makes sense. Hitting Will-O-Wisp here would put this into a really tough spot. Yeah, this game's not over by any means, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. I think Sucker Punching into Flutter is pretty good here. I personally like Sucker Punch plus the Will-O-Wisp onto Tyranitar. Okay, no Terras from their end. They just go for Gleam. Okay. Maybe Parabolic Charge was actually just better there, but I figured Belly Bolt wasn't going to survive the turn, but if we hit the Will-O-Wisp, it actually will, right? Yeah. Yeah, I think Muddy Water or Parabolic Charge may have been better there. Or actually even just Thunderbolt into Flutter Mane. Yeah, Belly actually did survive that. Man! And that was with the crit, too! Parabolic Charge would have been so satisfying there, but that's fine. The reality now is that we've burnt their Tusk, and so one thing that's really huge about... Sorry, burnt their Tyranitar. One thing that's really huge about the Great Tusk set here is that it has Stone Edge, right? So normally Flying Tyranitar would kind of be a problem for us, but because we have Stone Edge, even if they tear into Flying, we can just Stone Edge them for a KO, which is a really big deal. This is Max Speed Flutter, and since we got the burn onto the Tyranitar, I think this should be... It's not game over quite yet, because I guess I could defensively Terra the Flutter instead, right? But then that would be fine. I'm definitely clicking Shadow Ball here. I'm honestly down to Shadow Ball and Flare Blitz into the Flutter slot. Because even if the Yeah, even if Flutter protects, which I think it should here, it's fine. And if they don't protect and they go for defensive Terra with Flutter, this play should win me the game, I think. Yeah, so they Terra Tyranitar, which makes sense. It's going to be flying. But like I mentioned, I've got the burn onto it, and I have that Stone Edge waiting in the back as well. And now this means Shadow Ball will just one-shot their Flutter Mane. Beautiful. Okay, and that should be game over at this point. We have Choice Spec Shadow Ball from Flutter, Flare Blitz from Arcanine, and a Tusk in the back, and they're burnt on the Tyranitar. Okay. Yeah, I think the Sucker Punch turn, like, it wasn't really necessary since we know that they're not Focus Sash on the Flutter Mane anyway, and it's like getting that chip damage is fairly minimal. I think Parabolic Charge that would have allowed me to heal back a lot. Thunderbolt would have allowed me to KO the Flutter Mane or do a lot of damage potentially onto it. I don't know if it would be a KO, especially since it's booster special attack, probably a bulkier variant as well. But yep, now we can just bring out Great Tusk. And with Tusk, since we have Focus Sash on it, there's no need to actually click Stone Edge here. Shadow Ball, Close Combat. Close Combat should definitely be a KO. So let's just go for Shadow Ball and Close Combat. But I think the main thing here was that Belly Bolt was just so good into Talonflame plus Tusk as a lead, right? It essentially almost just knocked out both Pokemon immediately. And that'll be a KO. Nice. And then, yeah, one thing that was interesting was my opponent, like, not going for Tailwind immediately on turn 1 and going for Taunt instead. The lack of Tailwind meant that I could outpace the Tyranitar, for example. After those Pokemon went down, it also meant that I would outspeed their Flutter Mane, since they were the Booster Energy variant as well. And this is Max Speed Flutter. So that's the interesting thing about using Choice Specs Flutter Mane. Some people have very little speed investment on it. This set is just kind of designed to ideally outpace your opponent, and I feel like Max Speed Flutter Mane's actually really fallen off in terms of usage, and so this takes advantage of the fact that you will just be able to outspeed most of them and be able to pressure them with the one-hit knockout with Shadow Ball. So yeah, but once again, you can see how much pressure Belly Bolt applies just on turn 1 immediately, right? I don't think I used it perfectly in that game. I think, yeah, the Sucker Punch turn could have been a Thunderbolt, a Muddy Water, or even a Parabolic Charge there, but in the end, it gave us such a huge lead right from turn 1, as it almost got a one-hit KO onto both Talonflame and Great Tusk. So this Pokemon is incredible. Okay, very cool team here. Wow. Farigiraf, Dragonite, Palafin, Kingambit, Hadrian, and Annihilape. It's fun looking at a team like this because I feel like it reminds me of like all these different phases of VGC, right? It's like Palafin has been really good throughout Series 2. Dragonite's been really good as well as Kingambit recently. Farigiraf and Annihilape, Hadrian feels like, you know, kind of the early Scarlet and Violet meta. And so, yeah, it's fun to just see the combination of all of those. Annihilape is pretty scary here, I think. As is Palafin. We have Clear Smog on Torkoal, which can get rid of Bulk Up Boost, but it honestly might be Scar Final Gambit looking at that team composition, because there's no, like, Redirection, there's no Intimidate, there's no Screen Support. Yeah, I mean, this is just a matchup I have very little experience with, so I'm not really sure how to approach it. When in doubt, I kind of like leading Belly Bolt, as per usual. I'm thinking... I honestly want to bring Torkoal here. This is tough. Flutter, Torkoal, Tusk. I didn't bring Arcanine out, which seems questionable, but they have 2 Defiant users in the Kingambit, as well as Annihilape. So Arcanine feels a little bit less valuable. I thought about brewing Roaring Moon here, but I don't know. Like, I don't think it's actually that good. It's Annihilape Farigiraf. Huh. They're going to go for Gambit, right? It could be Final Gambit Trick Room. It could be like a Ghost type attack on a Flutter Mane here as well. Personally, I'm down a Parabolic Charge here, I think. And Moonblast into Farigiraf. Okay, it is not Choice Scarf Annihilape. We get Specs Moonblast off. I don't think Parabolic Charge KOs, though, unless they attacked us here. Yeah, they're probably going for Trick Room, right? But it's fine. I feel like Belly Bolt under Trick Room's honestly pretty solid into their team. Yeah, I can switch in Torkoal now. I'm down to go for a Parabolic Charge. Actually, I don't know. Is it even worth switching in Torkoal right now? I'd rather maybe just give up Flutter Mane here. No, I don't think a free switch into Torkoal is really that important. I think it's probably better to just switch. Okay. So, like, Belly Bolt and Torkoal are both pretty slow, so we can actually take advantage of my opponent's Trick Room. They're going to go for a Terra here, okay? Into Fire? Steel? Water? Yeah, Fire. Fire is pretty annoying on that thing, but it means Tusk can hit it for super effective damage. Oh. I honestly didn't know Farigiraf got beat up. That's so cool. Yeah, I did not see that in team preview whatsoever. That's really neat. That's really bad news for me. Yeah, great play. Does this KO me? Oh, Belly Bolt, no! I'll miss you. Yeah, this is really tough. Now, that's so cool. I've, like, just never actually gone up against this combo before. Specifically beat up. I wonder if they were meant to orb on Farigiraf, because we did have Sash on the Great Tusk with Taunt. So that would have worked against a Choice Scarf Annihilate Final Gambit lead as well. But yeah, I'll go Headlong Rush here into Annihilate. They should protect, but... And then Overheat into Farigiraf. If they don't protect, though, we could actually pick up a double KO here. Farigiraf protects. Is Annihilate protecting? Okay, I mean, that stalls out their own Trick Room a little bit, so I'm fine with that, I guess. Beat up plus Annihilate is honestly probably one of the best answers into Belly Bolt, because Belly Bolt can't deal that much damage into the Annihilate as is. We honestly just don't have that many good answers into Annihilate with this composition, because I don't want to bring Arcanine. We can't even burn it since they're Fire Terra. Flutter doesn't do very much if they go for a Terra. Belly Bolt doesn't do much. Torkoal doesn't do much. Roaring Moon doesn't do much. It's really all down to the Great Tusk, but the problem is obviously my opponent set up Trick Room, right? That being said, because of the play that they made, Overheat plus Headlong Rush does work here. I just wonder if they contemplate switching here. You would expect some switches, right? I also wonder if Clear Smog gets the KO here, but I really don't want to risk it. We have Flutter in the back. I haven't gone for a Terra yet. I think like Terra Fairy Flutter with Dazzling Gleamer Moonblast post Trick Room makes sense. I don't think Rage Fist KOs Torkoal here. Oh, and Annihilate actually does make the switch. It could be Dragonite coming out, which would be bad. Good switch. Okay. It's so hard to cover for that, though, because, like, I guess I could have clicked Stone Edge there. That actually may have been the right play. I don't know, though. Stone Edge just feels so scary to bring without knowing what they actually have in the back. Probably does KO Annihilate, though, right? So we have Yawn as well, which I think is one really critical part of the equation right now. I think the main thing I'm trying to think about is, do I actually click Yawn, or is it better to just Overheat to break multi-skill on Dragonite right now? Annihilate comes out. If this is Tailwind Dragonite, I think I'm also done for right now. Oh, I also don't have Protect. I kind of forgot about that. But they don't know that. Normally here, if you're my opponent, you would expect Tusk to protect pretty much every time. I'm down a Headlong Rush Annihilate. And then Yawn into the Dragonite slot. Okay, they didn't protect either slot. Ah, they're doubling up onto Tusk. I don't have counterplay to that because I don't have Protect here. Yeah, that's game over, I think. This is where if we had the more standard Great Tusk slot with Protect over one of like Stone Edge or Taunt, we would have been in really good shape, I think. Is it still possible to win? Oh, it totally is, because I have Helping Hand on Torkoal. It depends on what their last one is and if Flutter can survive the turn. It probably doesn't, right? But like we have Choice Specs, Helping Hand, Shadow Ball into Annihilate. I probably can't beat whatever their final Pokemon is realistically though, but I think I have to go for Shadow Ball instead of Power Gem as well. Does Annihilate protect here? If not, nah, actually with that switch I think it's probably just over. Let's see though. Okay, we get Helping Hand. Yeah, I could protect. Oh, if I actually targeted the Dragonite slot and one-shot Hatterene, could that have been it? I mean, the problem for me is that Torkoal just doesn't do enough damage in this endgame, right? Like, I needed Tusk, and Tusk just went down too quickly. I could have switched Tusk out into Flutter that turn, but nah. I think it was mainly just not expecting beat up plus for beat up from Farigiraf into Annihilate, and now that I've seen this combo, I think if I were to ever go up against it again, I would expect it a lot better. But yeah, first time fighting against it, at least from what I can remember. And it's not that easy for this team to deal with it. Tusk is the best response, but they have decent anti-Tusk stuff. I can't even yawn Hatterene. Man, that prediction, I wonder if it would have given me the chance to win. I'm just going to go for it here, though. I kind of have to. How would I play this match differently if we were to fight against each other again? The answer is definitely prioritizing Great Tusk as a lead because of Taunt into the Farigiraf specifically. Okay. Yeah, so they end up switching Annihilate. It's definitely multi-scale plus AV. And a Trick Room. Smart. Man, that was kind of risky though, right? Like, if I just Shadow Ball Hatterene, maybe they're Focus Sash, but if I Shadow Ball that, yawn into the Annihilate slot, I still don't think I can honestly win from that spot, but yeah. Is there anything I can do from this point on? Probably not, right? Yeah, with Annihilate in the back and Torkoal not being able to do anything, I think it's game over. Good play. Very, very cool strategy. Yeah, Farigiraf being able to outspeed Annihilate under Trick Room as well, which is quite nice. And unfortunately, we fell short of that knockout with Moonblast turn 1. I think, oh, you know what would have been interesting? Going for Fairy Terra immediately with Flutter Mane in this one. Because that actually would have allowed me to just deny Trick Room outright on turn 1, which would have been pretty huge. And, like, then the Flutter still applies a lot of pressure with Moonblast the next turn. They'd have to bring out one of Dragonite or the Hatterene, both which, like, Moonblast from Specs Flutter does pretty well into. Yeah, I actually think I should have just considered Fairy Terra on Flutter, because I didn't really get value out of Terra in this battle at all, and I think in this one I was like a little bit hesitant to go for it, but since we have 4 HP, 156 defense EVs, like if they're the Scarf variant and I Fairy Terra, we should survive a Ghost type attack, I would expect, right? It's not super effective anymore, and we've got defenses. Then we get a very powerful Choice Specs Moonblast off onto the opposing side, plus the Parabolic Charge, potentially just get the knockout. The main thing in this is that I needed the Tusk to deal with the Annihilate, and because they had Dragonite as a switch in, that was really good for them. And then Trick Room was also fairly difficult to deal with. But yeah, if you're looking for a Belly Bolt counter, look no further than this game where they had the beat up into the Rage Fist combination, which was really strong here. All right. There's another Annihilate here. There's also Gastron, Amoonguss, Arcanine, Grimmsnarl, and Flutter Mane. Belly Bolt's interesting here. My opponent's team is also really kind of slow-paced and bulky, though. Curious if it's actually appropriate to bring. I think ideally we only let them get 1 screens up, so I'd like the idea of leading Flutter Mane. I think Yawn from Torkoal is actually really good here to apply pressure immediately. Belly Bolt's just like, it's so slow-paced and passive. It's also completely walled by Gastrodon. This is probably not the right Belly Bolt matchup. I think it's, we do too little damage with it. And I think Annihilate is one of the worst Pokemon for it to go up against, as we just saw. So I'm thinking Flutter Torkoal, Roaring Moon, plus Tusk. The idea behind Flutter Torkoal is that Torkoal can just click Yawn immediately on turn 1, and if they lead like Grimmsnarl, I can consider Fairy Terra, Specs Moonblast into it immediately, denying them Reflect, which is a big deal. Yeah, I think like one of my key takeaways from that last game was one, bringing Bellibolt into a matchup with a Annihilape in general. I think I should think twice about, and then 2, I didn't, you know, use my Terra well on that one. I guess the problem here is with this lead, they could just Flare Blitz into Flutter. So the question is, how aggressively am I willing to trade on turn 1? I think the answer is honestly fairly aggressive. I'm down to go for this choice specs. Okay, let's consider what other Terras I'd go for in this. Fire Terra makes some sense. I don't think Grass Terra on Tusk really changes too much. It does help out actually against Gastrodon and Amoonguss. But I like the idea of Specs Fairy, Moonblast, KO Grim, and then Yawn into Arcanine. Maybe Arcanine protects or switches here, and that's also a possibility, but I'd expect it to just Flare Blitz me here. But I think trading Grimmsnarl to only let them set up Light Screen is pretty valuable, since if I lose Flutter Mane, that Light Screen actually is not going to help my opponent very much at all. And Rory Moon and Tusk both are really aggressive into my opponent's team, especially with the Sun being up as well. Yep, play Light Screen. I just really don't want them to get both screens up, and I think it's much better for me to like pressure out Light Screen than it is to Reflect. So, nice. Get the one-hit KO. They'll probably Flare Blitz. Snarl would make me so happy to see here, though. Oh, nice. Amazing. That is so excellent, because now the Arcanine slot is yawned, which is really tough. So this is the main thing about my opponent's team, right? Like, I think they're a lot more passive, and so the idea is that, like, I'm just going to try to overwhelm them with offense as quickly as possible and don't give them the time to, like, set up, right? Yawn plus Clear Smog on this Torkoal I think will be really good into their team in general as well. So, yeah, I think this next turn I can consider actually staying in with Flutter Mane, because I think the Arcanine essentially is more or less forced to switch out. They actually bring out Amoonguss. Interesting. Okay. So Arcanine pivoting out certainly makes sense. You could Spore into the Flutter slot. I think we kind of just eat it up right now. The question is whether or not Amoonguss protects in this position. I'm down for Moonblast and Yawn into the Arcanine slot. You could stay in with Arcanine. I think the tricky thing for my opponent right now is if you switch, I can obviously capitalize off that. But with Light Screen being up, like, I think their best play is switch Arcanine out and then just Spore into the Torkoal slot. Having Taunt on the Tusk will help out against Amoonguss. They do stay in. Nicely done. I think that's not an easy play to make. Great play. Blitz into Flutter. Yeah, this is fine though, right? Because the thing is now Arcanine falls asleep. I get Tusken, and I can just taunt into the Amoonguss slot and then switch Torkoal out. And they don't have Reflect, so then I have Tusk plus Rory Moon out in Sun. Yeah, and I burn a turn of sleep here immediately as well. So I'll take that trade at the end of the day. I don't think it's that bad at all. It's a big question though, I think, of what their final Pokemon is at this point, honestly. Yeah, so let's bring out Tusk. Because if it's Flutter Mane, I already committed my Terra and they still haven't used their Terra. Flutter can be kind of scary, right? I would like to taunt here into Amoonguss. And then switch out into Roaring Moon. I'm personally hoping it's Gastrodon. Let's see. Okay, Annihilape works too. Yeah, the main thing is I outspeed, and this taunt is a really big deal. And I have Clear Amulet with the Annihilape, which is also a really big deal. Sorry, Clear Amulet with Roaring Moon. So we have double Photosynthesis activated right now. Taunt onto Amoonguss. Yeah, they can't Spore. Perfect. Okay. Now what? I think a pivot into Arcanine here certainly makes a lot of sense for my opponent. The question is whether or not you pivot into Arcanine and attack with the Annihilape, right? Because it's very free to just, like, headlong rush into the Amoonguss slot. and throw chop it. The other temptation, I think, is to just double up onto Annihilate here immediately. I'm pretty down for Throat Chop plus Headlong Rush into Annihilate. Because even if Annihilate protects here, then the next turn... Well... I don't know, I could go for the same play next turn. I also thought about switching in Torkoal. Nice, they don't protect, that's huge. Do we get the knockout here is the question. Oh, man, that was so close. Did they Drain Punch? Ah, nice, it's bulk up. Cool, that should win us the game. That's why I made that play. All we have to make sure is that they don't get Amoonguss in for free. So, I think the play that actually works out best here is to taunt into the Arcanine slot. Because Arcanine is asleep right now, right? So the only thing I'm actually worried about is if it were to pivot out into Amoonguss. Their best play would be, like, switch Arcanine out into Amoonguss, protect, Annihilate. But Taunt covers for that, which is pretty good. And I think Breaking Swipe also works here. This is where Clear Amulet was so huge. Yeah, so they switch out Arcanine. But now with Taunt into Amoonguss, that slot is basically rendered useless. That's why that single Yawn on turn 1 I thought was a really big deal in this matchup. Right? And now with the Taunt, it means that I can just throw chop the Annihilate slot totally safely. So, yeah, it's funny because I think in the previous game, just having Protect over Taunt maybe would have been better for me. But I think Taunt is such a nice tool on this team. And it's something that people just have very little experience fighting against in a matchup like this. So, yeah. Yawn can apply so much pressure, right? Because it essentially is like, okay, you either stay in and you eat up the sleep or you switch out, but I can leverage that to my advantage. So, Photosynthesis wears off. That's totally okay. That Clear Amulet also being so huge for me here as, yeah, I'm not going to click Breaking Swipe out of fear it survives. I think Throat Chop onto that slot is totally fine. We're at -1 attack. We're at neutral here. I think it's fine to switch out into Torkoal right now. Do we even need to switch, honestly? The main thing is this Rocky Helmet. And I don't know what their offensive attack is. I think it's fine to go into Torkoal here and then just Throat Chop. Yeah, because like the reality is Arcanine plus Amoonguss already just doesn't do that much into my team. I can slowly start burning sleep turns with Torkoal as well, and the Amoonguss can't put me to sleep either, thanks to Taunt. Okay. Annihilate actually switches, okay. The switch makes sense, but I think if anything, it just favors me even more now, because it's like another free Throat Chop into the Arcanine slot. They have to give up their bulk up boost as well. I think this is smart, though, actually, because I think my opponent recognizes the only way they can really win this game, as we actually missed the knockout on Arcanine. Okay. And eats up Citrus Berry. Man, we were so close to knocking out both Pokemon in this game, but yeah, my opponent's team is one that really leverages off just having a lot of bulk. Great Pollen Puff as well. That was a really nice turn, honestly. Nicely done. It's taunted for one more turn. Yeah, with that Pollen Puff, I actually think it's probably better to switch back out into Tusk right now. And then throw Chop into the Amoonguss slot. This endgame is like a little bit annoying to play through right now, especially because Arcanine survived with just like 1 HP, but I think it's still fine because Arcanine just hasn't really been able to burn sleep turns at all. And like now I've just reactivated Photosynthesis on both Pokemon, right? So we have so much damage pressure. Yeah, Throat Chop is doing so much work right now. Nice. Okay, stays asleep. Yeah, Pollen Puff again. Perfect. Okay. With that, I can just Throat Chop Amoonguss and Headlong Rush into Arcanine. I guess Amoonguss should protect here, and Arcanine can Terra, right? They still haven't Terra'd yet in this game. The timer's definitely counting down at this point, though, right? Like, Amoonguss can only really sustain by switching out, but then you would give up Annihilate. That being said, I actually, you know, wonder if switching in Torkoal earlier was correct. In my head, I was like, well, if I get the KO onto Annihilate here immediately, that's great. But I will say Roaring Moon has been putting in so much work with these, you know, Clear Amulet Throat Chops. It's funny, though, because the Rory Moon has 172 attack EVs, and so this is an example of a game where if we had just slightly more attack investment, we would have gotten the knockout onto both Arcanine and the Rory Moon. Or, sorry, on the Annihilate. So Mungus protects. Okay, Throat Chop and a Protect. That's fine. Arcanine stays asleep. Nice. Yeah, I think a Wake Up there actually could have given them a shot, but now I think it's really difficult to win. This should just one-shot. Yep. Okay. And I think now Throat Chop should just KO a Mungus from the range that it's at, and then Headlong Rush should just KO Annihilate. And yeah, like the plan I had made going into this game was to only let them get 1 screens up, and yeah, them not getting Reflect up I think made the game a lot harder, right? Especially with that turn 1 Snarl as well. So no Reflect is up right now. I think the main thing I want to respect is this being Steel Terra. If you think about what Terra's Amoonguss normally are, I don't think any of them... I guess it'd be Dark Terra. That's the one thing, but yeah. Because it could be Steel Terra Annihilate, but I really just don't want to give that a Defiant boost, so I think the safest play is just to Headlong Rush the Annihilate slot and Throat Chop into Amoonguss. And they just go for Rage Powder. Perfect. They didn't Terra, right? Grimmsnarl didn't Terra, obviously, on turn 1. Annihilate didn't Terra. Arcanine didn't Terra. Amoonguss didn't Terra. Yeah. But you can see where, like, I don't know, if I imagine I had Belly Bolt in this game, like, what in the world would Belly Bolt do against the Annihilate, which can bulk up and just soak up damage and then Rage Fist and return against us, right? The answer is not very much. And so I think I'm glad to feature this game because we brought Belly Bolt in all of the first 3 battles, but the reality is that there are certain matchups where it's not great against, and we happen to run into Annihilate in back-to-back games. And in Game 3, I still think it would have been decent, depending on the Annihilate set, but I just didn't really expect Fire Terra plus the Protect, like, Rage Fist set. With the Farigiraf, I just really thought it'd be Final Gambit instead, so that was a, cool lesson to kind of learn. And that's a great example of learning from your losses, where it's like, okay, if I'm to go up against Farigiraf and Annihilate in the future, I'm definitely going to be thinking about that duel way more. And I think Tusk would have just been a better lead in general. Tusk, like, lead or Terra Fairy Flutter turn 1, right? So, yeah, I think it was kind of cool to see, like, Game 3 leading into Game 4, because the late main lesson I had learned after Game 3 was, hey, like, I should consider going for aggressive Terras with Flutter Mane if it means, like, taking a really good trade on turn 1. And in Game 3, things would have played out really differently if I think I had just gone for that Fairy Terra, because I think that plus the Parabolic Charge would have knocked out the Farigiraf, and that would have put me into a much better position. So, yeah. Either way, though, I am really, really happy to feature Belly Bolt. It put in so much work across Games 1 and 2, and overall, just a really interesting Pokemon as well. And it's honestly, like, not a gimmick. I think it's a very legitimate Pokemon. There are different ways you can run it. I've seen Grass Terra with Terra Blast, Flying Terra with Terra Blast as well, but the general idea is that it's really good into a lot of these teams that are like super fast paced and offensive, but can't necessarily actually deal enough damage to Belly Bolt, while Belly Bolt can heal back with Parabolic Charge as well. So thanks so much as always for watching. Thanks to David Kotesh for the team. Check him out, linked in the description below. Leave a like if you enjoy, and I'll see you all next time. All right, peace.